Well, I think that's an important point to make for this discussion because the geographical distribution of probably where all of you live. I mean, it's probably not just the city of Grand Rapids or just Ada or Cascade. It's probably, as far-reaching in Lowell or North Kent County, even Ottawa County and Ingham County.
So let's look at Grand Rapids
yes.
on that for just a moment.
Please.
Here. As a pastor, I have the liberty of using one of the greatest textbooks for change. And the Bible says that where your treasure is, there's your heart. When you look at the sheer growth of our community and the financial investment that we've made in the science corridor versus the investment that we're making into the lives of young people under the age of 22, it is absolutely insulting to the population of people that live in Grand Rapids that we would spend almost $750 million in construction in one area that's never going to produce a high school diploma. That corridor is never going to teach a young mother that it's not appropriate to have 3 or 4 boyfriends or to live unmarried. And when you begin to look at what the long-term commitment has been, as our city has grown, so has this problem because we've attempted to turn a deaf ear to this. We have a very unique community. I'm happy that I've lived here now 25 years. I moved from Benton Harbor, Michigan, a city that is now in the midst of some of the same trauma, but was not nearly as affluent. But as the community's grown, we have withheld the resources to really deal with this. We want to grow in commerce, but we are not growing in areas of compassion to deal with this issue. We're a very giving community to all, and when you look at approximate dollars, youth violence community-wide is specifically with the young African-American males is the least audience that is financed through foundational support. And if for some of the thinkers here today, if you want to start challenging that statistic, look at the annual reports of a number of local foundations and ask them to find out what was your allocation to this particular issue. And it would be embarrassing, or the church community for that matter. Very rarely is there an allocation on their line item budget that exceeds $20,000 to deal with this. Oftentimes it's under $5,000. And over the last 25 years, we have watched this condition grow to be a cancer. And although we have an internationally known science corridor to deal with health issues, we're still not dealing with something that's very prevalent and alive and growing at the same rate as cancer, HIV, and AIDS.
Well, that's a great segue into sort of discussion, discussion of solving the problem. And we talked about even yesterday in our discussion that there's more African-American men in the Michigan prison system than there are in college. It takes 38,000 hours a year to incarcerate somebody when we're not making the investment on the front end to curb some of the influences and resolve some of the issues that children are growing up in. And Shanae, you talked, I think, very well about sort of the systemic influences on kids that sort of leave them without hope to get them to the point that they're not able to sit still for a job interview or they can't take responsibility. And we've even talked about in some of the previous sessions that we've had around the importance of the significance of poverty and hunger in our community, how that affects a child. We talked about brain development and the 0 to 5 initiative when we had that presentation last year. With all these environmental and cultural influences on children and adolescents, from especially in the range from 14 to 21, is this problem solvable, preventable?
Well, I absolutely, I think that we can impact this problem. Obviously, I think the approach is a multi-leveled kind of approach. I think generally we're in crisis mode reacting to youth violence, and that makes without enough resources, obviously, and that's get law enforcement, and particularly across the country, you see even all. I just looked at some data where there were 8, 9 states that had enacted legislation around gangs. in just 2008 alone. And here we are just early still in 2008. So I think that's intensive intervention when we're doing law enforcement, we're doing, we're locking people up, and we're throwing a lot of resources to that at $38,000 a pop for to house an inmate. Obviously, because of our state's economic conditions, that's starting to shift, but those dollars aren't shifting quite quick enough. And so obviously there's a significant amount of public policy that needs to go on. But, you know, so I think we need to attack the problem across all ranges. We need to do the preventative kinds of things so that we get kids prepared. We need to do the deep work of working with families. And there's not quite enough strategies right now in our city in that regard that really help work with families to help them develop the parenting and family wellness skills to be able to do. That's going to be the biggest preventative strategy. One of the things that Doug and Maria's foundation is looking at through their Vision 2025 is to work in three sectors, both church, education, and community, to really work particularly with families and parents to really help them develop the kinds of skills they need to be able to foster healthy kinds of families. I think we've seen some of those kinds of initiatives. There was, we had gotten a demonstration grant that got housed through Pine Rest, where there was this healthy marriage, healthy relationship initiative, and some of that work has continued to go on where you're doing the family wellness kind of things. Jubilee Jobs was actually one of the designing programs and was very much involved in that. In terms of what we're doing at the foundation in terms of youth violence is really taking a multi-leveled approach. First, we've been convening a multi-sector table to really begin to have conversations about the extent of the problem and what kind of strategies, so that we can look at it from a systems approach. And so Chief Belk has been at that table. There's been actually even some researchers out of Calvin in particular that had a terrorist background, you know, that does GIS and terrorism, so it's kind of interesting. But really looking at that from how do you design your neighborhoods and how do they either foster violence or don't foster violence? Very, very interesting perspective. So we just were able to kind of address some of Jerry's concerns. We just successfully brought some additional foundations to the table just this week. Bert Blakey has been working with us, and we were able to bring some additional foundations to really take a look at this problem. We're going to do a demonstration grant with some frontline service providers this summer. Jerry's organization is one of them. Urban Young Life is another. Hispanic Center is another. Jubilee Jobs is working in connection with Urban Young Life, and that's to provide employment services, mental health services. Jerry, help me out here. To really, and our goal is really to do this demonstration grant to understand how we can be successful with this particularly disengaged population, and then scale that to 100 and then to 300 over the next 3 to 5 years, so that we've got some systemic kinds of things happening. The other things that we're doing is engaging the community and the churches, particularly around neighborhood and family strengthening. There's some work that's happening at United Way that hopefully will be with 15 neighborhoods. And so really trying to get into those core city neighborhoods and strengthen them. And then it's difficult to know the extent of this problem, so just the whole evaluation systems of data sharing. I mean, we have silos of data, so we don't know exactly the extent of the problem or how we're going to be doing on this problem without closing those gaps. So part of Doug and Maria's foundation is working on that as well.
You know, when we live in a very interesting corporate culture here in West Michigan. Oftentimes we are called to meetings simply to have another meeting. Mm-hmm. There's never, ever any level of urgency as it relates